This is a special edition of the Daily Article Podcast for Thursday, January the 30th, 2025. Nothing short of a nightmare, tragedy over the Potomac. This special edition daily article is written by Denison Forum co-founder and CEO, Dr. Jim Denison, and narrated by Chris Elkins. An American Airlines jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew members collided with an Army helicopter that apparently flew into its path as it was landing at Ronald Reagan National Airport last night. Officials do not believe there were any survivors of the deadliest U.S. air crash in nearly 24 years. The plane was flying from Wichita, Kansas to Washington, D.C. Kansas Senator Roger Marshall said the tragedy can only be described as nothing short of a nightmare. President Trump stated that he had been fully briefed on the terrible accident and added, "May God bless their souls." Senator Marshall agreed when he said, "My prayer is that God wraps his arms around each and every victim and that he continues to be with their families." But if you're like me, a prayer like that at a time like this can be hard to pray. My father died of a heart attack at age 55. I have been a minister for more than 40 years and thus have seen more than my share of death and grief. I know that death comes to all unless the Lord returns first. I know every time I board an airplane that it could be my last time. But if I dwell on this fact, I might not get on the plane. If I focus when the morning begins on the fact that it might be my last morning, it's hard to face the day. So, like David, I move through life thinking tragedy will not come to me, quoting Psalm 30, verse 6, "As for me, I say in my prosperity, I shall never be moved." I assume that I will continue to be secure as I am while I write these words from the safety of my study. I am not so foolish as to think I can guarantee such security for myself. I know that too much is outside my control, from natural disasters to bad actors to diseases. I have flown into and out of Reagan National Airport several times over the years and taken more flights to places around the world than I can count, each without tragic accident. But I know that what happened last night could just as easily have happened to me. So I readily acknowledge that every day that passes in safety is God's gift and say with David in the first part of Psalm 30, verse 7, "By your favor, O Lord, you made my mountain stand strong." However, if I credit God with the good, I am just as likely as David to blame him for the bad when he continues in the next part of verse 7, "You hid your face, I was dismayed." The Hebrew word translated dismayed could be rendered, "I was horrified and terrified." This is only logical. If I believe my physician to be responsible for my good health, I feel justified in blaming him when I'm sick. If he could accomplish the former, he should be able to prevent the latter. And when sickness comes, I may seek another physician under the assumption that my current doctor is no longer capable of caring for me well. This is how we so often react with God when tragedy strikes. I know this to be true on a very personal level. My father experienced such atrocities during World War II that he never attended worship again. I have known parents who lost a son or daughter and soon left the church, finding themselves no longer able to worship the God who could have saved their child but did not. I understand their thinking. If God ever performs a miracle, why not for them? If he ever heals a sick child, why not theirs? If he ever protects travelers from tragedy, why not those flying into Reagan National last night? I'm not aware of any theological reasoning that fully explains innocent suffering. I know we live in a fallen world where suffering results from the fall, according to Romans 8, verse 22. But I also know that God sometimes prevents such suffering. I don't know why he sometimes does and sometimes does not. Innocent suffering does not persuade me that God cannot exist. Billions of suffering people over the centuries have worshipped various gods without allowing their pain to veto their faith. But it does challenge my belief that God is all-knowing, all-powerful, and all-loving. If he's all three, he knew about last night's tragedy before it happened. He could have stopped it, and it seems to me that he should have wanted to stop it. But he did not stop it. My logical assumption is not that he didn't know or couldn't have prevented the disaster. It is that, for some reason, he chose not to. What does this say about him? After C.S. Lewis's beloved wife died of bone cancer, he wrote, "Not that I am, I think, in much danger of ceasing to believe in God. The real danger is of coming to believe such dreadful things about Him. The conclusion I dread is not, so there is no God after all, but, so this is what God's really like. Deceive yourself no longer." But it's not so simple. If we are to blame God for all innocent suffering, mustn't we credit Him for all innocent good? If we blame Him every time we experience pain that is not our fault, shouldn't we thank Him every time we experience good that is not our causing? So I'm back to David's prayer in Psalm 30, verse 7, crediting God when his mountain is strong and being dismayed when he apparently hid his face. All I know to do is to do what he did. In the hard times, I will be honest with my pain and ask my hard questions, knowing that God invites me to argue it out with Him, a literal translation of Isaiah 1, verse 18. With Paul, I will plead with him to remove my thorn in the flesh, referenced by him in 2 Corinthians 12, verses 7 and 8. With Jesus in Matthew 27, verse 46, I will cry, my God, why have you forsaken me?" With David in Psalm 30, verses 8 through 10, I will implore him, "To you, O Lord, I cry, and to the Lord I plead for mercy. What profit is there in my death if I go down to the pit? Hear, O Lord, and be merciful to me. O Lord, be my helper." In good times, I will bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all His benefits from Psalm 103, verse 2. I will pray with the prophet in Isaiah 25. I will praise your name, for you have done wonderful things. I will worship with David, continuing in Psalm 30, verses 11 and 12. You have turned for me my mourning into dancing. You have loosed my sackcloth and clothed me with gladness, that my glory may sing your praise and not be silent. And I will try to remember that because I know from 1 John 4, verse 8, that God is love, He can only want what is best for me. He must weep as I weep, as we read in John 11, verse 35, and from Psalm 23, verse 4, walk through the valley of the shadow of death alongside me. And He promises in Hebrews 13:5, I will never leave you nor forsake you. I will continue to believe that His holy and loving character compels Him to redeem all He allows, even when I cannot understand such redemption on this side of paradise. I will choose to say with Paul in 2 Corinthians 1, verse 3, and the first part of verse 4, Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of all mercies and God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our affliction. And I will try to remember, as verse 4 continues, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. All the while, I will look to the day when I will join David in a world where there is no tragedy and pain, but only joy and light. As we say together from Psalm 30, verse 12, O Lord my God, I will give thanks to you forever. On that day, from Revelation 21, verses 3 and 4, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be His people, and God Himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more, neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain any more, for the former things have passed away. Read the words again, death shall be no more. This is the guarantee of God.